The roar of the London mob was a physical thing, a wave of hate that struck her chest. She stood on the scaffold, the coarse hemp of the noose already biting into her neck. She was Elara Vance, 20 years old, and she was about to die for a crime she did not commit. The evidence was a lie, the trial a farce, and the man who framed her was likely watching from a comfortable window. She closed her eyes, ignoring the jeering crowd and the weeping priest. There was no one to save her. The executioner moved to pull the bolt. A single desperate shout pierced the din. "Stop, in the name of the king!" The chill of Newgate prison was a living thing. It seeped through the thin wool of Elara Vance's frock, settling deep in her bones, a damp and final cold. For 3 weeks, this had been her world. The dripping stone, the rustle of rats in the straw, and the distant, agonizing cries of other lost souls. She was a traitor. So said the king's bench. So said the forged evidence. So said her former employer, General Sir Arthur Davies, whose pained testimony had sealed her fate. Elara was, or had been, a simple creature of letters. An orphan with a gift for languages, she had secured a position in the general's household as a private secretary and translator. She handled his correspondence, organized his military papers, and sometimes translated sensitive communiques from French and Spanish allies. She was trusted. She was invisible. Until she wasn't. The evidence had been damning in its simplicity. A packet of letters found hidden beneath a loose floorboard in her small attic room. They were written in her own neat, precise hand, or a perfect, malicious copy of it. They detailed British naval patrols in the Channel, information passed to a known French agent operating in London. Worse, a small bag of French gold louis, 50 coins in all, was discovered in her modest trunk. Elara had wept. She had raged. She had proclaimed her innocence to a panel of indifferent, wigged judges who looked at her as if she were a particularly repulsive insect. "Miss Vance," the prosecutor had boomed, his voice echoing in the Old Bailey. "You had the access, you had the skill, and now we find you had the motive." She had tried to explain. "My lord, I know nothing of that money, and the letters, the handwriting is mine, but the words are not. Someone has copied my script." "Copied?" The prosecutor had laughed. "A fanciful defense. And I suppose the gold simply materialized, a gift from the fairies." The courtroom had tittered. General Davies, a man she had respected, a hero of the Peninsular Campaign, had looked away, his expression one of profound disappointment. "I would never have believed it of her," he had whispered, loud enough for the jury to hear. "She was like a daughter to me. This is a viper's sting." His words had hurt more than the verdict. The jury was out for less than an hour. Guilty. Treason against the crown. The sentence was mandatory and horrific. To be hanged by the neck until dead. Now, the day had come. The dawn was a smear of grey misery outside the high, barred window. The jailer, a squat man named Hobbs with surprisingly gentle eyes, had unchained her. "Time to go, miss," he'd murmured, offering her a small cup of watered-down ale, which she refused. Her stomach was a knot of ice. She walked the final corridor, her legs numb. She heard the priest, Mr. Abernathy, muttering the litany for the dead, but his words were just a meaningless hum against the roar of her own terror. They emerged into the open air of the prison yard, where the scaffold stood. It was a raw, new wood thing, smelling of sawdust and finality. And the crowd, dear God, the crowd. They were packed into the streets, surrounding Newgate, a sea of angry, distorted faces. They screamed, they spat, they threw refuse. "Traitoress!" one woman shrieked, her face purple with rage. Hang the French whore! Elara flinched, her dignity crumbling. This was her epitaph. Not the clever girl who had mastered 4 languages, not the kind woman who read to the general's aging mother, but a French whore. She held her head as high as she could, her dark hair whipped across her face by a biting wind. She would not give them the satisfaction of her tears. She mounted the steps, the executioner, a burly man in a hood that seemed more for theatre than anonymity, gripping her arm. He was surprisingly gentle. "Just breathe deep, miss. It'll be quick," he muttered. She stood on the trap door. The priest held up a crucifix. "Elara Vance, do you have any final words? Do you repent your grievous sins against God and King?" She looked past him, scanning the crowd one last time. Was he here? The person who had done this? The one who had meticulously practiced her handwriting, stolen her meagre savings, and replaced them with blood money? Was it Julian, the general's handsome, feckless son, always in debt? Was it Lady Davies, who had always looked at Elara with disdain? "I am innocent," Elara said, her voice hoarse but clear. It carried, just for a moment, above the din. "I die an innocent woman. May God forgive those who have borne false witness against me." The crowd booed. The executioner sighed and pulled the coarse hemp noose from its hook. He slipped it over her head, tightening it against the skin of her throat. It was rough. It smelled of rope and sweat. Elara closed her eyes. She thought of her mother, dead 10 years, a kind face in a hazy memory. "I am coming, Mama." The executioner reached for the lever. "Stop!" The word was a cannon shot. It was not a plea. It was a command. Elara's eyes snapped open. The crowd, too, fell silent, a confused murmur replacing the roar. A horse, a massive black destrier, was forcing its way through the throng, its rider not bothering to be gentle. People scattered, shouting in anger and surprise. The rider was a man, tall in the saddle, wrapped in a many-caped greatcoat, his face shadowed by the brim of a tall beaver hat. He looked neither left nor right, his gaze fixed on the scaffold. He pulled the horse to a rearing halt at the base of the platform. "An order from the Home Office," the rider bellowed, his voice aristocratic and sharp as a razor. He held up a parchment, its red wax seal flashing in the grey light. "This execution is stayed by order of Lord Sidmouth." The executioner froze, his hand inches from the lever. The prison governor, a portly man named Wrexham, bustled forward, his face pale. The rider dismounted in one fluid, athletic movement. He was not a messenger. His boots were gleaming, his tailoring immaculate despite the hard ride. He took the steps 2 at a time, ignoring Elara completely. He handed the parchment to the governor. "What is the meaning of this?" Governor Wrexham sputtered, fumbling with the seal. "The sentence was pronounced." "The sentence," the man said, his voice now a low, dangerous drawl, "is suspended. My orders are to take custody of the prisoner, immediately." He turned. For the first time, he looked at Elara. His face was hard, angular, and utterly devoid of pity. His eyes were the color of a winter sky, a pale, piercing grey. He was young, no more than 30, but carried an air of absolute, unquestionable authority. This was a man accustomed to being obeyed. "You are Alistair Compton, the Earl of Wexford," the governor whispered, finally recognizing the man. The crowd gasped. The Earl of Wexford was one of the most powerful and feared men in England. A shadowy figure whispered to be the true power behind the Home Secretary, a man who had hunted spies during the war, a man who answered only to the Prime Minister, Lord Liverpool, himself. The Earl ignored him. His cold gaze swept over Elara, taking in her prison pallor, the terror in her eyes, and the rope still hanging loosely around her neck. "Remove that," he commanded the executioner. The executioner, trembling, quickly fumbled with the knot and pulled the noose from her throat. The rough fibers scraped her skin raw. Elara's legs gave way. She would have collapsed onto the trap door had the Earl not shot out a hand, gripping her upper arm. His grip was like steel, impersonal and bruising. He did not pull her close in a gesture of comfort. He held her upright as one might prop up a broken chair. "You are coming with me, Miss Vance," he said, his voice flat. He didn't wait for a reply. Half dragging, half carrying her, he moved her toward the steps. The crowd, which had been silent in shock, found its voice. But it was no longer anger. It was confusion. What's he doing? Is she pardoned? Wexford. What's Wexford want with her? The Earl of Wexford paid them no mind. He moved through the parting sea of people, his carriage, a severe black coach bearing a silver crest, now waiting. He bundled Elara inside, her thin prison shift soaked from a sudden, cold drizzle. He climbed in after her and slammed the door. "Drive!" he ordered the coachman. The carriage lurched forward, the sounds of the crowd fading as they gained speed on the cobblestones. Elara huddled in the corner, shaking violently. She was alive. She was not dead. She was sitting in the opulent, leather-scented carriage of the most powerful Earl in London, her neck raw and bruised where the gallows rope had been. She looked at him. He was staring out the window, his profile as severe as a Roman coin. He had not saved her. He had claimed her. And as she looked at his cold, merciless face, Elara Vance was struck by a terrifying new thought. She had just been rescued from death, only to be delivered into the hands of a man who might be infinitely more dangerous. The journey was agonizingly silent. Elara, shivering in her thin, damp frock, sat on the plush velvet squab, a stark contrast to the opulence surrounding her. The Earl of Wexford didn't speak. He did not look at her. He seemed consumed by his own thoughts, his gloved hands resting on a silver-topped cane, his gaze fixed on the passing streets of London. Elara's mind was a whirlwind. The raw terror of the gallows was fading, replaced by a disorienting, heart-pounding confusion. Why? Why would a man like Wexford, a man known as the King's Shadow, intervene for a convicted traitor? He was famous for his ruthless pursuit of spies, not his mercy. She was a nobody, a secretary's daughter. It made no sense. She stole a glance at him. He was formidable. Power radiated from him like a physical force. It wasn't just his title or his wealth. It was in the hard set of his jaw, the intelligence in his watchful grey eyes, the absolute stillness of his posture. He was a predator at rest. Where are you taking me?" she finally whispered, her voice cracking. The Earl's head turned slowly. His gaze was not cruel, but it was utterly lacking in warmth. It was the gaze of a scientist observing a specimen. "To my home, Miss Vance," he replied. His voice was a low, smooth baritone. "You will find it a considerable improvement on Newgate." "But why?" she pressed, clutching her hands together to stop them from shaking. "I don't understand. Am I free? Am I pardoned?" "You are neither," he stated flatly. "You are postponed. Your sentence is stayed, not commuted. You are, for all intents and purposes, my prisoner, not the Crown's." A new kind of fear, colder and more insidious, gripped her. "Your prisoner? What do you intend to do with me?" He almost smiled, but it was a mere twitch of his lips, containing no humor. "Do not let your imagination run wild, Miss Vance. My intentions are not romantic. You are a tool, a piece of a puzzle I intend to solve." Before she could ask more, the carriage slowed and turned, the crunch of gravel replacing the rattle of cobblestones. They had passed through a set of imposing iron gates and now drew up before a house that could only be described as a palace. Wexford House was a fortress of pale stone in the heart of Mayfair, its windows gleaming, its facade imposing and magnificent. The carriage door was opened by a footman in pristine livery. The Earl descended, and then, to Ilara's surprise, turned and offered her his hand. It was a reflex of his breeding, nothing more. She placed her trembling, grimy hand in his gloved one, and he helped her down. She stumbled slightly, her legs still weak. He led her up the grand staircase, past a stern-faced butler who bowed low. "My lord, the preparations are made." "Good Simmons," the Earl said. "See that Miss Vance is attended to. She is to be given quarters in the north wing, and she is not to leave them, under any circumstances." "Of course, my lord." The butler, Simmons, turned his impassive gaze on Ilara. "This way, miss." Ilara looked back, panicked at the Earl. "Please, I demand to know what is happening." "You demand nothing, Miss Vance," Wexford said, already turning away to his study. "You have no rights here. You have no freedom. What you have is a single, slim chance to earn that freedom. First you will bathe. You smell of prison and fear. We will speak this evening." He disappeared into a room, the door closing with a quiet, final click. Ilara was left with the butler, who gestured for her to follow. She was led up a sweeping staircase, through halls filled with priceless art and silent, watchful statues. The opulence was suffocating. She was a ghost at a feast, a condemned woman walking through a museum. She was shown to a room that was larger than the entire cottage she had grown up in. A fire crackled in the hearth, a copper tub steamed in the corner, and a simple, clean day dress of dark blue wool was laid out on the massive four-poster bed. A young, nervous-looking maid, perhaps no older than Ilara, curtsied. "My name is Mary, miss. I'm to help you." An hour later, Ilara was a different person. The grime of Newgate was gone, scrubbed from her skin by the hot, lavender-scented water. Her hair, washed and brushed, was tied back with a simple ribbon. The plain wool dress was warm, a shield against the lingering chill in her bones. But the comfort was a lie. This was a gilded cage, and she was more uncertain of her fate now than she had been on the scaffold. As dusk fell, painting the London sky in shades of bruised purple and blood orange, the butler, Simmons, returned. "His lordship will see you now, miss." He led her not to a dining room, but back downstairs, to the study she had seen the Earl enter. Simmons knocked once, then opened the door and gestured her inside, closing it behind her. The room was vast, lined floor to ceiling with books. A globe stood in one corner, and maps of Europe, of the Americas, of the British Isles, were spread across a massive mahogany desk. The Earl of Wexford stood by the fireplace, a glass of dark brandy in his hand. He had changed from his riding clothes into a severe black evening coat. He looked every inch the aristocrat, the statesman, the spy. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing to a leather chair opposite his desk. Ilara sat, perching on the edge. He watched her for a long moment, his grey eyes analytical. "You are an intelligent woman, Miss Vance. Your records show you are fluent in 4 languages and proficient in cryptography. A rare skill set. The sort of skill set that would make one an invaluable secretary or a very dangerous spy." "I am not a spy, my lord," Ilara said, her voice firm, the terror giving way to a spark of her old fire. "I am aware," he said simply. Ilara blinked. You are? You believe me?" "Believing you has nothing to do with it. I know you are not the spy," he said, taking a sip of his brandy. "The evidence, you see, was the problem. It was too good, too neat." The letters were a perfect copy of your hand. The gold was too easily found. A professional French agent would have been subtler, and a novice traitor, such as yourself, would have been far more clumsy. He moved to his desk. This was not espionage, Miss Vance. This was a frame. Someone needed a scapegoat, and you were perfectly positioned. You had the access. You had no family to protect you, no powerful friends to plead your case. You were, in short, the perfect victim. Ilara stared at him, her heart hammering. You knew this. You knew this all along. You let me go to the scaffold. I suspected, he corrected, his voice cold. Suspicions are not proof. I only received confirmation this morning. An hour before your scheduled appointment with the hangman. My associate at the Home Office, a Mr. Pendleton, is an expert in forgery. He has been studying the letters for a week. He found the flaw. The flaw? Your E's, Wexford said. You loop them slightly to the left. The forgery looped them to the right. A microscopic difference, but a definitive one. It was not your hand. It was, however, an excellent copy, which means the person who framed you had access to a great deal of your correspondence. They studied you. Ilara's blood ran cold. General Davies, or his son. Precisely, the Earl said. Which brings us to why you are here. The information leaked was not minor. It was a copy of the new coastal defense strategies for the Mediterranean fleet. A catastrophic loss. The traitor who sold it is still at large. They used you to cover their tracks, believing you would be dead, buried, and forgotten within the month. Your death was meant to be the end of the investigation. He leaned forward, his hands flat on the desk. His power was palpable, filling the room. But you are not dead, Miss Vance. You are here. And your presence, alive and well, is going to make the real traitor profoundly nervous. What do you want from me? Ilara asked, her throat dry. I want you to help me find him, the Earl said. You are my weapon. You know the household. You know the general, his habits, his family, his associates. You are the one person who can move among them and see the cracks. You are the bait I will use to draw the serpent from its hole. You want me to go back, she stammered, horrified, to see the man who sent me to die? Not yet. First, we will work. You will tell me everything. Every conversation you overheard. Every visitor who came to the house. Every financial difficulty. Every hushed argument. Every detail, no matter how small. Your life depends on your memory, Miss Vance. He paused, his grey eyes locking onto hers. Here is the bargain I offer. Help me. Give me the traitor. In return, I will give you more than a pardon, which would still leave you a social pariah. I will petition the Crown for a full exoneration. I will see your name cleared in the Times. I will give you a new life, a stipend, and passage to anywhere you wish to go, America, the colonies, wherever you please. And if I refuse? Ilara asked, though she knew the answer. The Earl's face hardened. If you refuse, you are of no use to me. The stay of execution will be lifted. Governor Wrexham will be informed that the Home Office has concluded its inquiry, and your original sentence will be carried out. You will be back on that scaffold before the week is out. He let the threat hang in the air, thick and toxic. This was not a rescue. It was a trade, her life for a traitor's. Ilara looked at the man before her. He was ruthless, manipulative, and cold. He had held her life in his hands for a week and done nothing, waiting for his proof. He had saved her only when she became useful to him, but he was also the only man in England who believed her. And he was offering her the one thing she craved even more than life, justice. I am not your prisoner, Lord Wexford," Elara said, standing up, her hands clasped before her. "I am your partner. You will treat me as such. I will not be your bait to be sacrificed." The Earl studied her, a flicker of something. Surprise? Respect? In his cold eyes. He gave a slow, curt nod. A partner, then. A very junior partner with a rope around her neck. But a partner nonetheless. "Very well, Miss Vance. Let us begin. Tell me about the General's son, Julian Davies." The days that followed blurred into a routine of intense, exhausting work. Elara's gilded cage became an office, a war room. The Earl of Wexford was a demanding taskmaster, his mind as sharp and unforgiving as a surgeon's scalpel. They met every morning in his study, the room where he had laid out his chilling bargain. He would sit behind his massive desk, a fortress of mahogany, while Elara sat opposite, a pot of tea and a stack of paper between them. "Begin again," he would command, his voice devoid of pleasantries. "The week before the documents were stolen. Tell me everything." At first, Elara's memories were a jumble, clouded by the trauma of her arrest and trial. But under Wexford's relentless, structured questioning, patterns began to emerge. He was not interested in her feelings, he was interested in facts. "Julian Davies," he said, steepling his fingers. "You mentioned he argued with his father." "Constantly," Elara confirmed. "I heard them often from the study." "Julian, Mr. Davies, he has," she hesitated, "a problem with gaming." "He's a degenerate gambler," Wexford stated, not as a question, but as a fact. "He owes over £30,000 to a dozen lenders, including a rather unsavoury establishment in St. James, run by a man named Elias Thorne. That sum is significant. More than enough to motivate the sale of naval secrets." Elara stared. "You knew that?" "I did not know it, Miss Vance. I acquired the knowledge. While you were bathing, my men were visiting Mr. Thorne's establishment. We are not idle here." He slid a ledger across the desk. "These are transcripts from Thorne's bookkeeper. Julian Davies is ruined. He was given one final deadline to pay, a deadline that passed 3 days before you were arrested." A cold dread settled on Elara. "So it was him. Julian found the papers, copied them, and framed me to cover his debts." "It is the most logical assumption," Wexford agreed. "He is charming, feckless and desperate, a classic profile. He would have had access to his father's study. He would have had ample opportunity to study your handwriting. He was always kind to me," Elara murmured, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over her. Julian had often stopped by her desk, offering a charming smile, complimenting her on her translation work. Had it all been a lie? Had he been studying her, planning her demise, even as he smiled? "Kindness is the currency of the manipulative," Wexford said, his voice flat. He rose and walked to the window, staring out at the manicured garden. "But a theory is not enough. The General is a war hero. His son is a society darling. To accuse him, I need undeniable proof. The Crown will not move against the Davies family on the word of a rescued traitor and a stack of gambling IOUs." "So what do we do?" Elara asked, feeling a strange energy. The fear was burning away, replaced by a cold, sharp anger. She wanted him. She wanted the man who had smiled at her while planning to send her to the gallows. "We need to connect Julian to the buyer," Wexford said, turning back to her. "The gold found in your room was French. Old coins, pre-revolution. Our contacts believe the agent operating in London is a man known only as Le Corbeau. The Crow. He's a ghost, but he must have a way of communicating." He tapped a finger on a map of London. "Julian is trapped. His lenders are growing impatient. Even if he paid them with the first sale, he is a man who cannot stop. he will need more money, and Le Corbeau will want more secrets. We will provide him with an opportunity. The plan was audacious. Wexford would use his influence to plant a rumor that a new, highly valuable set of documents, battle plans for a garrison in India, was being prepared by General Davies. You, Wexford said, his grey eyes pinning Elara, will be the one to leak this information. How? Julian is still in London. He is, by all reports, celebrating his narrow escape from having a traitor in his household. He attends the opera. He is at the clubs. He is visible. We need to put you in his path. Elara's blood ran cold. You want me to see him? I want him to see you, Wexford corrected. He believes you are dead, or at the very least, rotting in Newgate. When he sees you, alive, healthy, and clearly under my protection, he will panic. He will assume you have talked, that we know everything. He will make a mistake. He will run to his handler. The thought of facing Julian made her physically ill, but the thought of the gallows was worse. There is one more problem, Wexford said, his tone shifting almost imperceptibly. You cannot be seen as Elara Vance, the condemned secretary. You must be someone else. Someone plausible. Someone on my arm. Elara blinked. I don't understand. We are attending the ambassador's ball at the Austrian embassy in 3 nights, Wexford announced, as if discussing the weather. It is the event of the season. Everyone will be there, including Julian Davies. Attend a ball, Elara stammered. With you? My lord, that is impossible. They will recognize me. I will be arrested. You will be ruined. You will not be recognized, he said, with absolute confidence. Not at first. You will be my ward. A distant cousin from the north, Miss Eleanor Compton. Her carriage broke down, and she is staying with me while it is repaired. A thin story, but my reputation is such that few will dare question it. He walked to the bell pull and gave it a sharp tug. As for your appearance, that is easily remedied. The door opened, and this time it was not Simmons. A formidable-looking Frenchwoman, dressed in severe but fashionable black silk, entered. She regarded Elara with a critical, appraising eye. Miss Vance, Wexford said, this is Madame Dubois. She will be in charge of your transformation. She is a genius, and I expect you to obey her every instruction. Madame Dubois circled Elara, muttering in French. The bones are good. The skin is pale. The hair is triste. Sad. We will fix this. Oui, my lord. It is possible. She will be magnificent. Elara felt like a horse being examined for sale. For the next 2 days, she was subjected to a whirlwind of fittings, probings, and lessons. Madame Dubois descended with a small army of seamstresses. Dresses appeared, gowns of silk and velvet, in deep jewel tones that made her look older, more sophisticated. She was taught how to dress her hair, not in a simple bun, but in the intricate, curled styles favoured by the ton. She was drilled relentlessly by Wexford himself on how to walk, how to use a fan, how to deliver a polite but dismissive snub. Do not fidget, Miss Vance, he chided, his voice sharp as they practised in the grand ballroom of Wexford House. Your posture is that of a servant awaiting orders. You are a Compton. You do not await. You are awaited. This is ridiculous, she finally snapped, frustrated, after he corrected the angle of her chin for the 3rd time. I am a translator, not an actress. You will be whatever I require you to be, he countered, his voice low and dangerous. Or you will be a corpse. Do not forget what is at stake. When Julian Davies sees you, he must not see the terrified girl from the Old Bailey. He must see a woman of power, a woman he cannot touch. His fear will make him careless. Now, walk. Again. She hated him in that moment. hated his coldness, his control, his unfeeling manipulation. But as she walked, she found a strange, cold power in his instructions. She lifted her chin, she let her gaze sweep the room with the practiced indifference he had shown her. She was also discovering a different side to the Earl. In their long hours in the study, she saw a mind that was brilliant, logical, and utterly dedicated. He worked tirelessly. He subsisted on black coffee and little sleep. He was, she realized, driven by a profound, almost obsessive sense of justice. Or perhaps a hatred of chaos. The traitor's actions were an imperfection in his world, one he was compelled to correct. One evening, exhausted, she had asked him, "Why do you do this? Why does it matter so much to you? It's not your family that was betrayed." He had been silent for a long time, staring into the fire. "When I was a boy," he said, his voice quiet, "my father's closest friend, the Duke of Northwood, was accused of treason. He was innocent, but the evidence was strong. My father did nothing. He was afraid to risk his own position at court. Northwood was executed. His family was destroyed. I watched his children, my friends, become beggars. I learned that day that innocence is a luxury. It is not a shield. Only power is a shield. I will not stand by and watch a lie prevail, Miss Vance. Not while I have the power to stop it." It was the first time she had seen the man behind the mask. The cold, logical Earl was fueled by a white-hot, hidden rage. He was not saving her out of kindness. He was saving her to right a wrong that was decades old. He was saving her to spite the memory of his father's failure. And as Elara looked at him, she realized her feelings were becoming complicated. The hatred was still there, but it was now mingled with a grudging, dangerous respect. They were not partners. They were not friends. They were two broken people, bound together by a shared enemy and a desperate need for justice. And for now, that would have to be enough. The night of the Austrian ambassador's ball arrived with a cold, clear sky, the stars like chips of ice above London. Elara stood before the long mirror in her chamber, scarcely recognizing the woman who stared back. Madame Dubois had been true to her word. Elara's dark hair was swept up, gleaming with a high polish, adorned with a simple string of pearls. The gown was a deep sapphire velvet, its cut elegant and severe, far more sophisticated than the pale muslins favored by young debutantes. It exposed her shoulders and the pale, smooth skin of her neck, now completely healed. The only trace of the woman from Newgate was the fire in her eyes, a mixture of terror and resolve. "You will do," Madame Dubois said, giving a single sharp nod of approval. A knock came at the door. It was Wexford. He stood in the doorway, himself transformed. He was in immaculate black evening wear, the white of his cravat stark, a single diamond pin glittering. He looked every inch the powerful aristocrat. His grey eyes swept over her, a slow, methodical appraisal. He took in the dress, the hair, the pearls. His gaze lingered for a second on her face. For the first time, his expression was not one of cold calculation. It was something else. An unreadable, brief flicker of surprise, perhaps even approval. "Miss Compton," he said, his voice a low drawl. "You look acceptable." He offered her his arm. His touch was formal, his arm hard as iron beneath the fine wool. "Remember," he murmured as they descended the grand staircase, "you are my distant cousin. You are visiting. You find London dreadfully provincial. You are bored, and you answer to no one. Least of all, Mr. Julian Davies." "I understand," Elara said, her voice steadier than she felt. The carriage ride was silent, but this time it was not the suffocating silence of their first journey. It was a shared, tense anticipation. They were a pair of hunters moving in on their prey. The Austrian embassy was a blaze of light, a river of carriages depositing the cream of London society. As Wexford and Ilara entered, a hush fell over the room. All eyes turned. The appearance of the reclusive, formidable Earl of Wexford at a social event was rare enough. To see him with a stunning, unknown woman on his arm was a sensation. Whispers erupted. "Who is she?" "A Compton? She has the look of them." "Wexford? Good God, I thought he only left his house to hang people." Wexford ignored them all, his expression one of faint, aristocratic boredom. He guided Ilara through the room, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. The gesture was possessive, a clear signal. "This woman is with me. She is mine to protect." Ilara felt a strange, unwelcome warmth at the contact. And then she saw him. Julian Davies was standing near the champagne fountain, laughing with a group of other young bucks. He was handsome as ever, his blonde hair artfully arranged, his smile dazzling. He was dressed in a vibrant blue coat, the very picture of a carefree gentleman. As Ilara and Wexford drew closer, Julian's gaze drifted over them. He smiled politely at the Earl, bowing, and then his eyes found Ilara. The smile froze. His face, in an instant, went from ruddy health to a mask of waxy disbelief. The colour drained from his cheeks. His champagne glass slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. He didn't seem to notice. He stared at Ilara as if she were a ghost. And she realized, to him, she was. She was the woman he had sent to the gallows, now miraculously returned, dressed in velvet and pearls, on the arm of the most dangerous man in England. "Julian? My dear boy, are you quite well?" a matronly woman beside him asked, concerned. Julian didn't answer. He just stared, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide with pure, unadulterated terror. Ilara, remembering her role, gave him a cool, dismissive glance. She leaned toward Wexford and said, just loud enough for Julian to hear, "My lord, who is that clumsy man? He seems to have seen a ghost." Wexford permitted himself a small, cold smile. "That, my dear cousin, is Mr. Julian Davies. Pay him no mind. He is of no consequence." Of no consequence. The words struck Julian like a physical blow. He flinched. Then, gathering his wits, he stumbled backward, bowing awkwardly, and fled the room, disappearing onto one of the crowded terraces. "He's running," Ilara whispered to Wexford, her heart pounding with a fierce, dark triumph. "As I expected," Wexford replied, steering her toward the dance floor. "He will go directly to his handler. My men are already in place. Mr. Pendleton, the forgery expert, is a dab hand at shadowing. Davies will lead us straight to Le Corbeau. Now we must maintain appearances." "What appearances?" Ilara asked, confused. "We must dance, Miss Compton," the Earl said. He turned and led her onto the floor as the orchestra struck up a waltz. He put his hand on her waist, and Ilara's breath caught. It was the first time they had touched in any way that was not clinical or controlling. His hand was warm, firm. He pulled her into the movements of the waltz, and she was surprised to find he was a strong, graceful dancer. They moved together, a striking couple in the center of the room. He was tall, dark, and imposing. She was radiant, a mystery in sapphire velvet. They were the focus of every eye. "You are a natural actress, Miss Vance," he murmured, his voice low, for her ears only. "I am well motivated, my lord," she replied, her voice just as quiet. The gallows tend to focus the mind. His grip on her waist tightened almost imperceptibly. He did not just see a ghost. He saw a ghost protected by a man he cannot fight. He will be desperate. As they turned in a slow circle, Elara looked past his shoulder. She saw General Sir Arthur Davies standing near a pillar, watching them. His face was not shocked, like his son's. It was a mask of cold, calculating fury. He, too, had believed her dead, and his eyes, as they met Elara's, were not those of a disappointed employer. They were the eyes of a man whose careful plans had just been set on fire. A sudden, chilling thought struck Elara, a new possibility that was infinitely more terrifying. Julian was a gambler, true. He was weak, and he was desperate. But was he clever enough to orchestrate such a perfect frame-up? Was he the one who had studied her handwriting, forged the documents, and planted the gold? Or was he, too, a pawn? She looked from the terrified, fleeing son to the cold, furious father. "My lord," she whispered, her voice tight with a new fear, "we may have a problem. What is it?" I think we're chasing the wrong man." Before Wexford could reply, a new figure approached them. It was General Davies himself. He moved with military precision, his face composed, though his eyes were chips of ice. "Lord Wexford," he said, bowing stiffly, "a surprise to see you here. And with a companion." He turned his gaze to Elara. She met it unflinchingly, her chin high, just as Wexford had taught her. "General Davies," Wexford said, his voice lethally smooth. "Allow me to introduce my cousin, Miss Eleanor Compton. She is new to London." The general's eyes raked over her. He was searching for the girl in the prison frock. He was searching for the secretary he had condemned. "Compton," the general mused. "Any relation to the Shropshire Comptons?" "A distant branch, General," Elara said, her voice cool and unfamiliar, even to her own ears. "We tend to find the country so much cleaner than the city." It was a perfect, subtle insult. The general's eyes narrowed. He knew it was her, and he knew that she knew. The battle lines were drawn, not in a study, but in the middle of a glittering ballroom. "Indeed," the general said, forcing a smile. "Well, I must find my son. He appears to have stepped out." "A pleasure, Miss Compton." He bowed and walked away, his back rigid. Elara turned to Wexford. "It's not Julian," she said, her voice shaking. "It was him. It was the general. Julian is just the excuse. The general framed me." Wexford's face was grim. "My men are following Julian. If you are right, he will not lead them to Le Corbeau. He will lead them to his father, and the game has just become infinitely more dangerous." The carriage ride back was a storm of tense silence. The ballroom's adrenaline faded, replaced by cold certainty. "It was the general," Elara said, as soon as the study door closed. Julian's terror was real, but the general's, his was anger. The anger of a man whose plot was unraveling. Wexford paced before the fire, his aristocratic mask gone. "The logic holds," he agreed, thinking aloud. "Julian is the motive. The debts are real. But he lacks the precision for such a clean operation. The general is a military strategist. He understands misdirection. He would know exactly how to frame a subordinate. He would have unlimited access to your handwriting." "But why?" Elara cried. "He said I was like a daughter." "That kindness was your blindfold," Wexford said, his voice hard. "He used his son's debts as a cover for his own treason. He framed you, delivered a believable performance at your trial, and you would hang. The investigation would close, Julian's debts would be paid by the French, and the general's reputation would remain spotless." A knock interrupted them. It was Simmons. "My lord, Mr. Pendleton has returned." Pendleton, the forgery expert, was breathless. "My lord, Mr. Davies did not go to any known French agent. He went straight to his father's house in Berkeley Square. He was in a state of high agitation. "And," Wexford pressed. "That's not all, my lord," Pendleton said. 20 minutes later, another man was admitted through the kitchens. Secretly. It was General Davies. Sir Arthur. He came in through the servants' entrance, as if not wanting to be seen entering his own home. Wexford and Elara locked eyes. The general they had seen at the ball, establishing his alibi, had left his own party to sneak into his own house. "He wasn't supposed to be at the ball," Elara whispered, the pieces falling into place. "He was supposed to be meeting his French contact, Le Corbeau. When Julian fled and went home, he disrupted the plan. The general had to abandon his real meeting to silence his panicked son." Wexford nodded grimly. "And what was he meeting Le Corbeau for? To deliver the second set of documents, the ones I invented, the India garrison plans. But you invented those." "I invented them," Wexford said, a cold smile touching his lips. "And I also had them created. They are a complete, plausible, and utterly false set of plans, currently locked in the general's old office at the Horse Guards, waiting to be stolen. I baited the trap, assuming Julian would be the one to take it." He turned to Elara. "The general has been exposed. He knows you are alive and under my protection. He will see you as the single greatest threat. He will not wait for me to act. He will act first." "You mean, he will try to kill me?" Elara whispered. "Or abduct you. He cannot allow you to speak. He will come for you. He will try to lure you out." Elara's mind raced. The general's mother, Lady Mary Davies. She was always kind to me. She's infirm. He'll use her. "Perfect," Wexford said. "He will send a note, forged in her hand, begging you to come, and you will go. You want me to walk into his trap? Yes, because it will not be his trap. It will be mine. He will expect you to come alone. But you will not be alone. My men will be with you, and when he reveals himself, we will have him. And Le Corbeau? A secondary concern. The general is the root." The plan was terrifying. It relied on Elara acting as the willing prey. "I will do it," she said, her voice quiet but strong. "On one condition, my lord." "Name it." "You will not be in the shadows. You will not be waiting a street away. You will be with me, at my side." Wexford studied her, the fear warring with the steel in her eyes. He gave a single sharp nod. "At your side, Miss Vance. I give you my word." They didn't wait long. A note arrived just after midnight. It was exactly as predicted, a shaky imitation of Lady Mary's hand, begging Elara to meet her at a disused chapel in 7 Dials, 1 hour before dawn. "He's desperate," Elara breathed. "He thinks you are a naive girl," Wexford said. He went to a cabinet and took out 2 pistols, checking the load of each. He tucked one into his own waistband. He held the other out to Elara. "I do not know how to use one," she said. "Then you will stay behind me," he replied, placing the second pistol in his greatcoat pocket. "Do not worry, Miss Vance. I am an excellent shot." The streets of 7 Dials were a labyrinth of shadows. Wexford and Elara, cloaked and hooded, slipped into the derelict chapel of St. Jude's. "Lady Mary," Elara called. A figure emerged. It was not the general, but a terrified Julian Davies, his pistol shaking. "Elara," he breathed. "I didn't write the note. My father did. He made me come." Wexford leveled his own pistol. "Where is your father?" "He told me he paid my debts," Julian sobbed. "I never knew he'd framed you. Not until tonight. He sent me here to get you. He's on the roof, with a rifle." "No." A furious roar came from the choir loft. General Davies stood there, holding a lit torch. "You interfering bastard!" he shrieked at Wexford. "He's a weak fool. I did it for him. I did it to save the family name. And this Clark? She was perfect. She should have died." With a roar, he threw the torch onto the dry pews. Flames instantly engulfed the nave. As Wexford pulled Ilara toward the door, the general leaped down, cutting them off. He raised his pistol at Ilara. "She dies first," he hissed. Bang! The sound was deafening. Wexford fired. The general stared, shocked, and collapsed with a red blossom on his chest. "Move!" Wexford yelled, throwing Ilara out into the cold air. He dashed back into the inferno, dragging the paralyzed Julian out just as the roof caved in. Wexford's men swarmed the scene. "See to the general," Wexford ordered. "If he's alive, he goes to the tower. Mr. Davies is under arrest." He turned to Ilara, his face grimed with soot. "Are you harmed?" "No," she whispered. He brushed a smudge from her cheek. "Come, Ilara," he said, using her given name for the first time. "Let's go home." The scandal rocked London. The Times ran the story. "War hero a traitor." The official story, crafted by Wexford, painted General Davies as a madman who set the fire and took his own life. Ilara's name was fully cleared. In the study, Wexford presented her with the official exoneration and £5,000. "You are free, Miss Vance," he said, his voice formal, retreating behind his cold mask. "The bargain is concluded." His coldness angered her. "Was that all it was?" she demanded. "Your power is just a prison, no different from Newgate. You're just as trapped as I was." She turned to leave. "Goodbye, Lord Wexford." "Ilara." His voice was hoarse. "Don't go." He crossed the room, his control shattered. He warned her that if she stayed, society would whisper, that they would never forget where she came from. "Let them whisper," she said, lifting her chin. "They accused you of betrayal," he murmured, cupping her face. "I claimed your innocence. Now, Ilara Vance, I am claiming you. Stay. Stay as my wife. Stay as the Countess of Wexford." She smiled. "Together, we will enjoy silencing them." He kissed her, a claim and a surrender. And for the first time since Newgate, Ilara was truly free. The story of Ilara and Alistair was just beginning. They faced a society that judged them, a ton that whispered about the Gallows Countess and her shadowy Earl. But together, they built a fortress, not of stone, but of loyalty and a power that came from shared survival. Theirs was a love forged in fire and sealed in truth, proving that sometimes the greatest innocence is found in the heart of the most dangerous man. What did you think of Ilara's incredible journey from the edge of death to the heights of power? Could you have been as brave as she was, trusting the very man who seemed to hold all the cards? If you were captivated by this story of drama, betrayal, and unexpected love, please let us know in the comments below. We love hearing your thoughts. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share it with a friend who loves a great story, and most importantly, subscribe to the channel and ring that notification bell. We have so many more tales of intrigue and romance coming your way, and you won't want to miss a single one. Thank you for listening.